Come join Melissa and her guests on the Chats from the Blog Cabin podcast. From North Carolina, this podcast will have you feeling like you've known these folks for years. Listen in as they chat about life, culture, current events, and more, all with a special Southern flair. Curl up with your favorite beverage and get ready to be entertained. Tune in now for a unique experience that's fun and insightful.
Hey y'all, welcome back to another episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. You know, the show where I virtually invite people into the blog cabin to chat about life. And today we're chatting with, I want to say a Jill of all trades. Jean, she is the creator of Success, the Success Method, an author and a podcast host. But wow, really, you do it all pretty much, don't you?
I try.
So before we get into what you do, tell us who you are. Give us a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on your show, Melissa. I loved your intro, by the way. It's so, I feel like I need a hot beverage right now. My name is Jean Tien, and, I've been in corporate, I would say, for at least 20 years now. And in my experience during that period of time, what I really noticed is that we are all working so hard, but then we get so frustrated because we are never where we want to be, or we think where we should be. And that creates so much tension and conflict within our lives. Then it creates dissatisfaction. And quite frankly, I don't want to misname it, but a lot of depression-like symptoms, right? In terms of giving up, frustration, etc. And that's what motivated me to create the Success Method, because I personally went through that myself. I went through what I like to think of as a mini midlife or mid-career crisis. And it pushed me into looking for answers of, why wasn't I happy, even though I seemed to have everything that I was supposed to have, right? And that's how I came across and created the Success Method, which is really based on the concept that there is no one definition of success, even though I think that's what we've been taught and conditioned to believe in since birth, that we have our own definition of success, and that when we find that definition, when we tap into it and we allow for it to become our North Star and we can work with it, that's where the fulfillment comes in. That's where success and authenticity and joy and meaning comes into life. And it really does change our lives for the better.
So how did you come up with this method?
Yeah, so through trial and error. That's basically it. It's through trial and error. And that's what I love about it, because it's not a formula that I created in a box, not having put it into practice. It's not theoretical, although, I guess you could call it theoretical, but it came to life because of my own personal experiences. And then when I started to apply it and when I started working with my clients, that's really where it came into. And I saw that it worked. And so that's where it all kind of fell together. And, I love acronyms. I think that's probably my conditioning from corporate. We have tons of acronyms. And, there was no better acronym for this process than the word success.
Okay, so tell us what the acronym SUCCESS means.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a 7-step proprietary process, right? And I think instead of going through all 7, I'm going to highlight just a couple of the really key points, because I think for your listeners, that's really where it matters. And I think one of the first and most important steps of this process is the S part, the first S, right? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because every time I say that, I think that commercial, and I'm aging myself, like, leave off the last S for savings. Do you remember that?
No, I don't remember that commercial, but I think we're around the same age, but I don't remember that commercial.
But that's not what it means. So the first S is sussing out your definition of success. And this is so critical because this is where we have to really get intentional and, present in terms of what success means to us rather than what it should mean to us. And, I think it's easy to do in the beginning, like, oh yeah, I don't really need the fancy cars. I'm okay with, riding a bike. It's better for the environment anyway. But even we have to dig even deeper than that. And that's why the sussing part is such like a key aspect of this process, right? Because it's really like questioning everything that we believed ourselves to be, everything that we strived to achieve and to become, and questioning, is that really what we want, or is that what someone has shared with us, or what we've been taught to want? And it's okay if somebody taught us that we should want something, but what's not okay is that we blindly accept it, right? Because that's where then we become dissatisfied with what we have, because it never creates a real true accomplishment, because it wasn't ours to begin with, it was somebody else's.
That is so true. And I mean, it's so important because success, it means something different to everybody.
Yeah, exactly.
How many of your clients have had a aha moment, like, oh my gosh, that's not what success actually means to me. This is what it means.
Yeah, they all have. But even more important, when I've asked them the question of what does success mean to you, none of them, 100% rate of non-response. Nobody could tell me exactly what success meant to them. They can certainly tell me, yes, I want to get promoted at work, and, I want to make 6 figures. Okay, but what does that mean to you? Right? Because those are just certain metrics, but what meaning does it have? And so I think so many fail in that aspect. And so it's almost like the analogy I always like to use is that you can't get into your car and tell your GPS that you want to go somewhere if you don't tell it where it wants to go. Right? Because then you're just driving around aimlessly. You can certainly, and GPS systems now are very advanced. You can tell them a cross street that you want to get to, or an area that you want to get to, and that's fine for now. But if you don't give it some destination, it has no idea where it's going to take you. And that's how we work too as humans. Like, we don't know where we want to go. What do we know? What turns do we take? What actions do we take? What steps? What do we look out for? And none of that becomes clear. And so all we're doing is like, we're just pedaling in the middle of the ocean, not knowing do we turn left, right, go straight? Like, what do we do?
I think that you hit the nail on the head. Most of the time, know what we want to achieve, know the goal that we want to achieve, but we don't know the steps to take to achieve that goal. So, wow, that is like cut and dry. So much of what is wrong with America right now, I would say. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree. We have been blindly following guidance from somewhere. And the question is where do these guidance, where do these so-called wisdoms and advice come from? And, and under what circumstances do they come from? And you can say, well, my mom said that this, and because she went through this, perfect, ding, ding. Let's focus on that. What did she go through? What did her parents go through? And what did their parents go through? So if you go down the lineage of circumstances where this one piece of advice came from, like, then we can see, wait, hold on a second. That was created way back when they had to do, when they had a ration for sugar, when they were punished for this, when they were punished for that. But are we in the same state? Are we still in the same environment? And even if we are, is this where we want to live in?
That's so true. And breaking those generational, don't want to say curses, but that's the only word I can think of. The generational curses that, are passed down from like, for instance, my husband is feels like he has to work all the time because he came from a very rural place in Mexico where they didn't have any running water or anything else when he was growing up. So now he feels like he can't spend the money because he's got to save it just in case the bottom falls out.
Right.
So you never know. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And so many of us have grown up with that concept, right? Because it wasn't that long ago where, we came out of war, where we came out of the Great Recession. I mean, it's not that long ago history.
Yeah, that's true. Now we need to take a brief commercial break, but we'll be right back. Hey y'all, it's Melissa coming to you from the Blog Cabin to chat about, for a few minutes, one of my favorite conferences that is coming up. It's called the Rise Up Christian Parenting Conference. Whether you feel like you've blown it as a parent or you're not sure how to navigate the next season of parenting, or you have non-Christian family or friends telling you how to raise your kids, I don't know how many times I got that, or you simply want to be challenged, encouraged, inspired, and equipped to be the best parent you can be, then the Rise Up Parenting Conference is one that you won't want to miss. The conference runs from March 14th through the 16th, but grab your free ticket by the 13th, so on the 14th you're ready to go. And the conference runs from 10 to 2 every day, but don't worry, if you can't make it from 10 to 2, you can always catch the replays later at your own time. So this is one conference that I highly recommend that you check out, plus it's free. How many times do you have a free conference? I will put in the show notes where you can find it. Be blessed. And we are back talking with Jean about the success method, but how can we lead with authenticity with the success method?
Yeah, I think that the success method really is the first step with tapping into authenticity. I think, it's such a hot topic today, right? Authenticity and how to be authentic and how to be you. And that's great for those of us who have started down this path of really looking into ourselves and finding what's important to us. But for those who haven't and they're being thrown these words, it's like, what do I even do with that? Like, how am I not being me? Like, I'm in existence today. Like, there's nothing about me that's not me. But I think it's just, we have to, with the success method, it's that first step. And it goes throughout the whole 7 steps, is what is important to you. And it's always coming back to you. And giving you and empowering you, the person that's using the method, right, to be able to be different, to think different, to not be told that this is what they have, rather than to tell people that this is what they're looking for, and to tell others that this is what it means to be them. So in whatever context, right? So if you don't like ice cream, but everybody else around you loves ice cream, it's that process that's going to take you through, like, all right, I'm going to be comfortable in my skin with loving ice cream, and I'm going to eat it in front of others, and it may make them uncomfortable, and I get that, but we'll cross that bridge when it comes. But I'm going to enjoy this piece of ice cream here, regardless of what negative things they're going to tell me about my ice cream. And so that's the authenticity aspect. It's like, almost, I want to say, like, it's weaved through every aspect of that success method. Mm-hmm. And when you are being led by your own purpose, when you are being led by what matters to you, then that's leading with authenticity, mm-hmm. right? And when you lead with authenticity, success will follow. I guarantee you, success will follow. And it may not look like your neighbor's success. It might not look like your success or my success, but we'll start to recognize the successes that are our own, mm-hmm. for ourselves.
A lot of times, a lot of people struggle with being authentic. So can you give some tips about how they can be their true authentic selves?
Yeah, I think that authenticity cannot happen without acceptance. Mm-hmm. So I think that that's absolutely the first step. And I love that you asked this question, because early, like, I have been having, I don't know, I think there's something in the air. I'll just say that. But I've gained so much weight lately.
Mm-hmm. I know the feeling. I'm right there with
you. And no matter what I do, I can't seem to lose it. And today, I was at the gym, and I was and I was standing next to someone who's very fit, who's lean. And I looked at myself in the mirror, and, like, I wasn't doing it consciously. I was just looking at me, but I could feel myself start to compare, start to tear myself apart, start to say, oh, those roles, they're so, like, offensive. And I caught myself, and I'm like, wait, that's not, why am I beating up myself? Because this is who I am at this point. Is this who I am going to be forever? No, I'm working on it, right? That's why I'm exercising. I'm starting to eat healthier. And it's an acceptance of who we are today. And when we can start to do that, then we can really start to let go of the shoulds and the should nots and all of these judgments that weigh on us so heavily, so that we can start to accept, okay, wait, hold on a second. I'm comfortable with being this way. I really enjoy my ice cream that's going to lead to weight gain. I don't care. I love it. I love it more than I love where fitting into my jeans. Whatever it is, it's an example. But that even those little things is where we start with the acceptance, and that's how we start with authenticity.
Yeah, you're right. The comparison game is so awful, especially with women. I mean, they are really like, that is one thing that we tend to compare to, like, oh, so and so has a better car, so and so has a better body, so and oh, she doesn't have 1 ounce of fat on her. Well, we don't see how she struggles to not have that 1 ounce of fat. All
Right.
we see is the highlight reel.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We never see what's on the inside. We only see what's on the outside. I love
Now,
it.
that's going to bring me to another thing about being authentic as far as social media goes, because social media is a highlight reel. And since we brought up being authentic, let's talk.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's like it's almost this dichotomy that we're seeing with the audience, with society today, right? There's this rise, and there has been over the last few years, of reality TV shows, which I think tells marketers today that people want real. They want to see what's real, but even reality TV is not real, right? They just want the drama. But then, people love it because it's real, and it makes them feel good that they're not perfect, but yet they love curated pictures. They love pretty things. They love, certain things out there. And I think from a social media perspective, we're in a very interesting place where people aren't necessarily, I'll call it this. I heard it on the radio the other day. It's cancel culture gone amok. And I think that that's where we are today. And I don't think it matters in terms of what you're putting out there, whether it's pretty or not or whatever. I think the focus today lately is not being offensive, but yet when you're not offensive, you're still offensive. And so I think we have to be thoughtful and mindful about what we put out there on social media. It has to serve a purpose, right? We have to stand behind it. I say never do harm with it, right? If we come from a good place, I don't think it'll create that level of cancel culture gone amok. But if it does, we can still stand behind it. But I think that that's the only way we can be at this point. I haven't really figured out a better way to be authentic on social.
Yeah. I mean, you pinpointed it. The cancel culture is rampant now. I mean, somebody can say one thing, and even if they didn't mean it the way that it was taken, people just go crazy with it. And it's like, okay, what do I do? How do I come back from this?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are afraid not to post the imperfect because of being called out for it.
Yeah.
That brings me to another thing, the imposter syndrome. I mean, that is so huge. I mean, we just talked about how women especially feel like they don't belong. I had a guest on a while back, and she has a PhD and she's a doctor, but she says she had to overcome that imposter syndrome because she was in a male-dominated field.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about how we can overcome that imposter syndrome.
Yeah, I think it's key when we're looking at how do we overcome imposter syndrome. I think authenticity is also very key, right? But where that fits in is this concept of the difference between fitting in versus belonging. If we're always trying to fit in and make ourselves fit into somebody else's mold of who we should be, that's where this imposter syndrome runs rampant. Because most of the time we'll never fit in. Because they create this from it's like a fairy tale box, right? Oh, I think this person should be this, and I think this person should be that. Okay, we created this mold, but where does that mold come from? Right? And so when we keep trying to fit into somebody else's expectations of who we are, we're always going to have imposter syndrome because we know we can't be that person. And we are imposters for trying to be that way. Right? But then when you step into this aspect of belonging, right? And we create the space that accepts us for who we are, then that's where that imposter syndrome starts to go away, because we're not worrying about, are we fitting in with other people's expectations of us? It's more about, are we behaving in alignment with our values? Are we behaving in alignment with our goals? Are we doing the things that serve, good, right? And then so I think, I don't really think anybody on this show is really going out there to serve bad. So I'll say, like, we're all out here trying to do good. And so if we're really doing that, and we're accepting of ourselves and our weaknesses, as we're doing it, and the fact that we're going to learn along the way, that imposter syndrome aspect goes away, because we're not trying to be something we're not anymore.
That's so true. And you just talked about being in alignment with your goals and your values. And a lot of people, I think that's when we totally get out of whack, was when we start placing too much value on things that we really don't value. Like they're not our high values.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I'm almost curious, like, I haven't asked this question, but if I did, I'd be curious to know, like, how many of us actually have sat down and figure out what our values are today?
That's so true. I mean, it's really shocking when you look at it, because I found that, like, there's 5 of my values, but the very first value for me is relationships. I value relationships above all else. So it's when you sit down and you actually write out what you value, and you realize, hey, that's when I get out of whack, is when I'm not in those values.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And I think, sometimes when we make decisions and we don't make them in alignment with our values, that's where we go, that's where the imposter syndrome comes from. That's where this stress and frustration and, all this other stuff comes from.
Which brings me to, a lot of people value being spiritual. How can we incorporate our spirituality into our business, especially if we work for a company, and also for small business owners, our business owners? How do we incorporate that without feeling like we are not validating other people's spirituality?
Oh, that's such a good question. I haven't even thought about it that way, Melissa. I think, for me, spirituality is about personal growth. I think oftentimes it gets combined with faith, with religion, with woo-woo, type of stuff. Take all that away. I think spirituality is really just about understanding the connection between our body, mind, and our soul, right? And when I say soul, I don't mean it in a woo-woo religious way. I mean it in a way that's just like the true essence of who we are. Like, what if we think back to, like, what makes us happy and all that other stuff, right? And when we, I think the way that we can combine the spirituality aspect of it is, number one, like what you were saying before, the values, right? Understanding our values, understanding how do we want to run the business? What is it that we're looking to serve with the business? And then I think it's so important to stay focused on it too, because shiny object syndrome, I mean, how many times have any of us gotten carried away with, oh, come here and I can help you make 7 figures, and come here and I can, show you the way to this. And, you run over and you're like, hey, I want it. But then, maybe it wasn't time for us at that point, or maybe it wouldn't have served us at that point, or maybe it's not serving our business, right? And so I think, and then we get disappointed when we don't get the results, because it wasn't meant for us in the first place. And I think that's where the spirituality comes in. And what I will say this too is that for me, one of my core values is integrity. I can't stand a lack of like, it drives me crazy. And so running rampant these days in the industry, whether it's like small businesses or coaches, is a certain lack of integrity, where we have become numbers rather than people.
Yep.
And I think that it's so important that when we look at spirituality and the business, are you looking to run to just make money? Because there are certain ways to do that. And you can do that with integrity as well. Absolutely. Or if you're really in the service industry, then that service has to come first. For above, right? Like the profits.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying you have to go into debt to serve your clients, but what I am saying is you should never sacrifice your integrity for the sake of profits when you're working with clients? Because then, where does it all go, right?
Yeah, that is so true. I mean, because incorporating your spirituality, you have to, like you said, stand by your values. And if you feel like you're out of whack with your values, like if you say, okay, I'm in the service industry, my thing is about serving people, and then you get so caught up on the dollar, 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 that most of the time that's when the service suffers, and people realize that, hey, they don't really care about me as a customer, and they go find somebody else.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think people have forgotten that. I think people have diminished the aspect or the intelligence of, their clients or their prospective clients, right? They're like, oh, we can do this. Like, they won't know. No, people know. People are pretty smart, and they've gotten even smarter, I think, as they've, I think people are looking more inwards these days rather than outwards. So I think people are getting even smarter. So it's so much more important to be able to treat people with the right intention.
Do you think that has to do with the fact that we were on lockdown for so long for the pandemic, that people were like, okay, now they're seeing things in a fresh new perspective and they're looking at things differently? Because I've heard a lot of times where there's a lot of people that have left the jobs that they were in before the pandemic because it wasn't satisfying once they realized what they were doing when they were at home all day working from home.
Yeah, I think people are getting smarter because they've had more time. I think the pandemic really has forced all of us to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think it really just kind of like, I feel like we were running on just auto, right? And then all of a sudden, it's like somebody forced you to like stop. Like your car is just, your auto brakes came on and it's like, and you're like jolted out of, habit, out of sleep,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then you're looking around and you're like, holy crap, what have I been doing this whole time? What am I doing this whole time? And, having been on lockdown and being forced to look at what you have and look at yourself, that's huge. Like, I don't know when it's ever happened before, but
Mm-hmm.
I don't know when it'll ever happen again. But absolutely, I think it's woken up a lot of us. And I don't want to use the word woke because it's so negative these days, but I think it's forced us to look at things differently.
That is so true. It forces us to kind of reevaluate our values as well, because a lot of people are like, what I put stock in before, you know what? I really don't value that now. I value more time spent with my family or less time spent with my family, depending on how it went. And I think they get more appreciation of the service workers and the teachers and the police officers and the nurses and the doctors, those that were in the forefront of the pandemic. I think people have a new appreciation for them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's hard not to recognize the day-to-day individuals. And I'm not saying day-to-day in a negative way, but I'm saying like the day-to-day individuals that we always took for granted, right? Those people out there that are serving us on a day-to-day basis that we just expect to be there, right? And it's amazing how many of them there are that we never really kind of paid attention to.
Yeah, and I think parents got a new appreciation for teachers as well. They had to homeschool their kids all day long when they're realizing that.
Oh, definitely.
Now, we talked about the success method. We talked about being authentic. We talked about the imposter syndrome and how we can incorporate spirituality in our business. But let's talk about first being human, because I think a lot of people take us being human out of the way. Like if we get emotional, no, I've got to shut that down. I can't show that in anything. Let's talk about how it's important for us to be human first.
Yeah, I love that question. And I've been thinking a lot about it, especially when we look at it from an entrepreneurial / corporate perspective, right? And like anything in our professional lives, if we look at, I'll just say corporate, because corporate, I know the history a bit better. And entrepreneurship is, I think, changing and evolving. But I think regardless if you are an entrepreneur, regardless if you have your own business or you're working for somebody else, there is this mindset that you have to go in tough, that you have to go in being stoic, clear mind, clear head at all times. And you're basically, and this is why I think, now that I'm thinking about it, this is why I think there's such a fear of robots coming in with artificial intelligence, being able to make better decisions than us, because that's who we were really expected to be. And now the technology has caught up and we can be that way, but just not us, right? It's these robots that are in there. But that's the beauty of it, is that we are human and we have these connections. And to your core value, Melissa, of relationships, that's what is lacking in terms of artificial intelligence. That's what we will always lack, at least in our near future, right? At least in our lifetimes. I don't think that they're going to have that. And so if we value what makes us human first, the fact that we can make mistakes, the fact that we can continue to grow, and the fact that we have connections that help us feel better every day, it is important. It absolutely is important. And, artificial intelligence has its place. It absolutely does. I'm not denying it. But if we want to look at the future of your business, what helps you stay competitive, it's not going to be artificial intelligence level type of stuff. It's going to be the stuff that's really going to win the hearts of others. And only humans can really do that. If we want to look at it from just a pure profit perspective, that's what it is.
Yeah, that's so true. And while you were talking, I was thinking about, I've heard so many people on social media complain about these big box stores that have now gone to self-checkout. And they're like, okay, where's our W-2 at the end of the year? Because we are now working for you. We're checking ourselves out. They're going away from employing because they're only looking at the profits down the line and not looking at the human interaction. Because a lot of people, that's the only interaction they will actually get.
So true.
And it's so sad.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Especially those that are senior citizens, or, those who have, whatever it is, their situations. But you're right. That is the only interaction that they get. And it's sad if they start to take it away.
And I know so many people have complained about it around where I live, because it seems like one of the big box stores, that's all they have open most of the time is the self-checkouts. And if you're going through the grocery and you have 40 or 50 items, if you're stocking up for a whole month, you really don't want to have to self-check yourself out.
Oh, yeah, I know. And then have to bag it yourself. I remember though the baggers are also going away too, but it is absolutely important. And it's you leave with such a nicer feeling when somebody's like, thank you, and they hand you the change, or they're like, you have a nice conversation with them, and it can literally change the trajectory of your day. Because you could be having a bad day, you can meet somebody really nice and have a nice conversation, and your faith in humanity is restored again, right? So yeah, I agree.
And then that brings me around to what your podcast is all about. It's called Unapologetically Authentically.
Oh, yeah. I don't know why, I have to change it. I think that was an error. It's Being Unapologetically Authentic.
Okay.
Yeah, authentically is a little harder to pronounce, say. Yeah. So it's Being Unapologetically Authentic. And it is a podcast that I'd like to, it's a platform that I'm using to really have these conversations that we're having, similar to what we're having, about how to dissect that intersectionality between authenticity and success, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's, in the first season, I really wanted to highlight these success stories where people were authentic, but took a different route.
Mm-hmm.
And, they started off, I have one guest that also was a high school friend of mine. She started off as a teacher, and then she realized that that's not where her passion was. And now she entered the travel agent space, and she loves it. And she's doing so well in such a short period of time. And, it's so important for people to know that you can switch your careers.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to stay in something that you're unhappy with just because you think you spent too much time or it's too late. It's never, because if it's something that you're passionate about, it can happen in less than a year. Because I think for her, it happened in a couple of years, where she went from 0 to 180 in just so fast. And then second season, I was focused on elevating the voices of Asian American women.
Mm-hmm.
because it is so important. And that's the authenticity aspect, especially for me as somebody who's, Asian American and female. And, looking at how we were raised, looking at the trials that we go through, the challenges that we experience in the world today. And then the third season, the theme is about truth. So I'm recording now the third season, and it is really about truth, like our personal truths. And again, it digs into the authenticity aspect of it, right?
I love the fact that you have a theme for each season, and I applaud you so much for, number one, not being afraid to point out that things, the inadequacies, that's the right word, with Asian Americans. Because my son-in-law, if you saw at the very beginning, he is an Asian American. He's from Japan. His mom was born in Japan. He was born in Japan, but then his stepdad came over when he was in the Air Force, so he's in the United States now. But there's so much stereotypes around Asian Americans, and especially with COVID. I mean, my heart just hurt for all that with COVID. So I 100% applaud you for being the platform for them to share their stories.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it's I think it's interesting because everything happens for a reason. And even though people got hurt through this process, physically, mentally, whatever, it really helped to elevate or to pull to the forefront for people to see that there is so much still like work to do, right? And it's not as easy as I think people thought it is for us, especially with the model myth minority, etc. So thanks. Yeah, it was a meaningful season for me.
I mean, because I'm gonna just throw it out there. My daughter says that by the time they have kids, it's going to be so mixed that nobody's going to know what they are, because she's Mexican American and he's Japanese American and German added into that.
Oh, wow.
So you're never going to know what they are.
Oh, well, they're going to have beautiful kids because, mixed babies are always gorgeous.
Yes,
so, yeah.
yes. I'm the mom of mixed babies.
Yeah.
So yes, I absolutely say 100% on that. But what is your goal going forward with your podcast?
So that's a great question. I'm not sure is the answer. And I do it. And, at the end of every season, the question is, do I want to do it again? Do I want to continue with it? And ultimately it comes down to the question of, do I have more to share? And so that's really where it motivates me, is that if I have more to share, I will continue to do it. And if I still have a passion for it, I'll still do it. But to me, it's always been a platform to share stuff that I can't necessarily share with friends or family or coworkers. Put it out there and have a say in it, and maybe hopefully one day it'll help somebody along the way. That's it.
That is you pinpointed right there. It's a platform for us to have a say in what's going on, even if we were silenced as little kids.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to say, "Hey, this is how I feel. This is what I think." That's one of the things with Chats in the Blog Cabin, is I wanted to make sure that people come on and that their views are respected, because it's only when we learn from listening to others that we can learn to not only better their lives, but our lives as well.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing though, Melissa? Because I didn't know that aspect would come through, and honestly, I'm an introvert. So talking to people sometimes is like, it's there. Yeah, exactly. But after every conversation, I feel excited. I feel like I've learned something. I feel invigorated. And like, it's almost that little drug that keeps me going. Like, oh, I want to learn more about what others think and have these conversations in a very like civil, respectful way, which is so missing these days. Can you imagine if we were all able to have these conversations in a regular setting, like how different the world would be today?
It would be so different. I don't know if you know any of the backstory of Chats in the Blog Cabin, but I was working with a coach, and it was in a challenge, and she said, "Okay, I challenge you guys to go live on Facebook and talk about one of your core values." And we just talked about core values, so it's relationships. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going live by myself because I am not going to do it. It's not going to happen. I definitely afraid of cameras. I used to teach. I loved teaching in front of kids. I could talk about stuff off the top of my head if they ask me questions, but get in front of a group of adults, forget it. Nope, couldn't do it. But I said, okay, I'm going to have a friend come on and chat about friendship, which is one of my core, relationships.
Yeah.
And from that moment on, it just stuck. And that happened all during the pandemic.
Wow.
So
Wow.
that's where Chats from the Block
That's amazing.
And since then, I've met interesting people like yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
and I've really enjoyed conversations. Like I'm enjoying this conversation right now.
Same.
I feel like we're kindred spirits a little bit.
I know, I do too. I'm like, oh, this is and it's such an easy conversation to have too, right? So, that's why the podcast is, we'll see, but it's just as long as I continue to have these great conversations, it'll keep going.
So, how did you decide what each season was about?
It's just like it comes. I don't know. I don't pre-plan it. I think about it for a little bit. I ponder it. I think season 2 with the Asian American was really something that was driven in terms of what I was seeing externally and kind of the conversations that I was having internally as well, and with amongst friends and coworkers. And this season, truth just stuck out as the word. So I was like, okay, let's go with it and then see. And we'll have a conversation about, people's truths when it comes to their success.
Has there been one episode that's really stood out that if people wanted to start with that one episode, besides episode 1, but if they didn't have time to listen to any other episode, was there one that like you could stick out? I know I'm calling you on the spot right here, putting you on the spot, that really stood out to you?
I think there were a couple of them that I really enjoyed recording, but I can't remember what. Sorry.
That's so funny. It's like, okay, I remember, but I don't remember the exact episode, or I don't remember what the episode was about, or you remember the person. I mean, because like, for instance, when we were talking about the imposter syndrome, I went ahead and wrote down, because I knew I was going to forget it, to link to that episode so that people would know what that episode was.
Yeah, I probably should do that too. But yeah, I'll be honest and authentic and say I don't remember.
See, but that's the thing about it. You're being honest, and you're not feeling shame about it, because there's so much shame about not, if you're not honest, you feel shamed. Like, okay, what if I am honest? They're going to shame me for this. There's so much guilt on ourselves, on the self-guilt. So how do we get over that?
Yeah, I think, you gotta just let it go sometimes. Like there's certain things that are important to hold on to, and there are just certain things like we're all, I think that we're all human, right? Going back to the human topic, humans all make mistakes, and this, in the grand scheme of things, I don't think is that important, right? If I made a mistake that ended up hurting somebody physically or mentally, yeah, then I would hold on to something, and there will be healing to do from it from my side. But we can't allow for these type of mistakes to weigh us down. There's too many of them otherwise, right? It's better to laugh anyway.
What happens though when the people around us don't allow us to forget our mistakes?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think it depends on the person who's around you. And I think, it's really going to be important for us as the individual who makes the mistakes to set boundaries, right? But before we can set boundaries, we have to forgive our own mistakes first. Because if you don't forgive your mistakes, nobody else is going to do that either.
Yeah, that's true.
Right. And even if and the funny part and the thing that comes to mind is that even if, okay, so let's say, for example, even if other people have forgotten about it or have truly forgiven it, but you're holding on to it and they say something and it, but because you're holding on to it, you're going to interpret it as like, oh my God, they're rubbing it in and they're like really just sticking it in me, right? Because that's our interpretation of it. Whereas the other person could have totally forgotten and not realized they made that connection, or that you made that connection. So if we don't forgive ourselves, there's no way other people are going to forgive and forget, because you're not going to let them.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. We need to forgive ourselves, and that's so hard to do. So hard to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you can tell. I can see you struggle with it too. I mean, it's like
Definitely.
when do we say, okay, enough is enough? We need to stop. We need to forgive ourselves for what we did and move on.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I think it's particularly hard for people who are people pleasers,
Mm.
and those who are recovering people pleasers. Yeah, same, same. I mean, how many times have you sat awake at night worried about what you said to somebody? Did I offend them? Is that why they didn't call me back? Is that why they haven't reached out to me?
Mm.
I can't even tell you the number of hours that I've spent worrying about that. And as you start to forgive yourself because you start to accept yourself,
Mm.
those that energy that's just spent there is decreases every time. And you can start there, but it's so quick to recover. So you catch yourself and you're like, wait, no, I'm not going there today. That's not where I'm going to go.
Wow. You're better than me because sometimes I can't. Like if somebody gets upset, even if they're not upset with you, but they get upset, okay, what did I do?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I still have those. I mean, we're human. We still, like we're recovering. We're not recovered, and I don't know if we'll ever be recovered in this lifetime. But we're recovering. But at least we're seeing it, and then we can make the choice. Then it's like, okay, there could be a million and one possibilities, and of why they're not, why they're mad. And I can ask them. That's one way to handle it. Or I can just move forward and I can expect them to be adults. And if they want to talk to me about it, great. If they don't, then that's on them. It's hard to when you're in the position like to think that. But we all have, I think it gets easier when we start to make choices where we start to forgive ourselves first.
That is so true. Now our time is almost up. Is there one last little nugget that you would want to leave us with before we talk about where we can find you at?
Yeah, you know, I think the biggest advice or the biggest tool that I can share with the listeners is if they are interested in leading with authenticity or succeeding with authenticity, is to really start the process of asking questions. And every little thing that comes through, I like to ask the questions of, even as we're scrolling through social media, why are they showing this? What are they gaining from it, right? Why am I doing this? Why am I reacting this way? Why do I feel this way? When we start to ask these questions, simple questions, we get so much more. And, this is where we really start to suss out that process of looking for what is meaningful for us, what is, really what success means for us.
And everything gets tied back into being authentic, stop living in the past, overcoming imposter syndrome, being human first, how to incorporate your spirituality, all comes into what success is defined for us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you just like boiled everything down into one little nugget. If only it was that easy in real life.
Yeah, I never said it was easy, but it's an easy acronym to remember.
So where can people find you?
Absolutely. So I noticed that you had posted my Instagram handle earlier. So it's Jean Tien on Instagram. And they can also, I think the easiest way to find me and reach out is through my website. So that's jeantien.com. And yeah, they can find how to, whatever they want there. And there's a freebie there as well if people are looking to learn how to better manage their time without, feeling the guilt for not working on a weekend or on a weeknight.
Oh, that's so good. The guilt. Because you always feel like there's one more thing you have to do before you close the door.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the reasons why I have the blog cabin. Is it's like 50 feet from my back door. It's a storage
Mm-hmm.
shed that we converted. I went and bought it. We converted it so it's my office. So at the end of the day, I can just shut the door and walk away.
That's awesome. And that is so key. It's so important to have that separation.
Yeah. So, and your podcast again, I'm not going to mess up the name, so I'm going to let you say.
Oh, no, that's okay. Yeah, I think we provided it incorrectly to you, so I apologize for that. The podcast name is called Being Unapologetically Authentic, and they can find it on Apple and Spotify and whatever other, um, platforms there are for podcasts.
Yeah, and you only have 2 seasons. How long are the episodes? How long are the seasons?
They're about, the first season was a little longer. I think it was like 12 episodes. The second season is about 6. I think we're going to come across like maybe 8 in the third season.
Okay.
Based off of kind of how we're recording now. So they're short. They tend to be short and sweet just because I have attention deficit problems. And I know there's plenty of people like me, so we try to keep it.
So this, you've done very well to have attention deficit problems for having almost an hour-long interview with me.
Oh no, having a conversation is all right, but when I start to listen, especially I like, this is why audiobooks never work for me. Like my brain just starts to drift off into like, did I fold the laundry today? Oh wait, did I turn the stove off? And then so that's why, yeah, we try to keep it.
Well, Jean, thank you for coming on and for sharing about how to be authentic and for sharing your podcast and everything. I think this is an amazing conversation, and I'm going to leave the open invitation that anytime you want to come back on, you are more than welcome to come back on, because I have really enjoyed this conversation.
Thanks, Melissa. I'd love to come back on whenever you want to have me. Yes.
All right.
So I've enjoyed it.
So guys, I will put in the show notes where you can find Jean, as well as where you can find her podcast. I'm going to put her website up there because I did not put it down on the bottom. And also, I'm also going to link to the imposter syndrome episode that we were just talking about, and link to your podcast as well, just to give you a shout out.
I appreciate that.
So guys, see you on the next episode of Chats from the Blog Cabin. Bye.